On the political front, Prime Minister Shamir tried again and failed again to convince the Labour Party of Shimon Peres to join him in a broad coalition. And Peres seemed to be inching a little bit closer to conceding that one day he might just conceivably talk to the P.L.O.
I'm ready to sit with every Palestinian, no matter what his biography was, if he's not shooting and killing, if he's ready to talk, if he represents his people, and if he seeks peace.
Sources in Jerusalem say Washington is trying to take some of the sting out of recognizing the P.L.O. by offering Israel something in return. High-ranking U.S. officials, according to these sources, are trying to convince Moscow to recognize Israel in the near future. This has been a long-standing objective of Israeli policy. Bob Simon, CBS News, Tel Aviv.
P.L.O. leader Yasser Arafat was in Cairo today for meetings with Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. Mubarak was a key force behind the U.S. decision to talk directly with the P.L.O. Arafat said Friday's opening round of talks dealt with ways to consolidate the peace process. A senior advisor to Arafat today charged the Reagan administration with now having an ambiguous policy toward the P.L.O., one lacking credibility. Here at home, meanwhile, officials were busy defending the move to talk with the P.L.O. after years of silence. Ron Allen reports.
Reagan administration officials continue today trying to shape the public's perception of the sudden decision to talk to the P.L.O., just weeks after not allowing Yasser Arafat to enter this country.
People often say, well, you changed your mind, you changed your position. Quite the contrary. Our conditions for a dialogue with the P.L.O. have been out there for some 15 years.
Administration spokesman emphasized that sitting down at a negotiating table is just the first step, and the P.L.O. must still match word and deed.
If this is a clever tactical ruse, not only will the dialogue with us go nowhere, but there's no prospect for peace.
We are looking at the situation very closely, the trust but verify as far as the P.L.O. is concerned.
Another administration objective is to constantly reassure Israeli leaders who feel betrayed and let down.
The President and Secretary Shultz and all of us have made it clear that our very first, one of our very top foreign policy priorities is the security of Israel.
That clearly means the U.S. will be watching closely to make sure the P.L.O. has truly renounced its terrorist past.
If it's merely rhetorical and there are further acts of terrorism, then the dialogue won't proceed.
Still unclear as how all of this will affect the uprising in the occupied territories. Administration officials, disappointed by the continuing violence, hope talking to the P.L.O. will lead to restraint and compassion on both sides.
Don't forget, when a Palestinian mother loses her son, she grieves every bit as much as when a Jewish mother in Israel loses hers.
At this point, another firm date for talks with the P.L.O. is not set. That could change after U.S. officials finish reviewing their first meeting. But right now, the strategy seems to be let the Reagan administration work out the broad framework and let the Bush administration work out the details. Ron Allen, CBS News, the White House.
Still ahead on the CBS Evening News, burying the dead in Armenia. And later on Inside Sunday, volunteering, a most precious gift. Charity founder Lech Wałęsa held a strategy meeting today with a broad spectrum of Polish opposition leaders. From London, Bert Quint has our report.
There were signs today that the long-delayed talks between Solidarity and the regime could begin soon. Lech Wałęsa and 127 other moderate opposition figures met in the cellar of a Warsaw church to prepare positions for negotiations that are seen as a vital step toward ending a crisis that has lasted nearly a decade. Recent riots point up the need to act quickly. Youths who share Solidarity's goals but don't have the patience of Solidarity's leaders are turning to violence. Participants in today's meeting said there has to be compromise, ways to resolve the conflict with the regime.
There should be no violence from either side.
Wałęsa hopes a meeting of Poland's communist leaders starting Tuesday will clear the way for negotiations. The big roadblock has been Solidarity's demand that the outlawed union be made legal again. Second-rung but influential party leaders have been resisting this and other moves toward reform because they're afraid of losing power, prestige, and privilege. But the government spokesman hinted last week that authorities may now be ready to bite the bullet and accord Solidarity some kind of recognition. Volunteerism says this comes close to granting our demand, but the government still has to dot the I's. The warning at today's meeting of moderates was that if it doesn't dot those I's soon, Solidarity will be powerless to prevent the spread of violence. Kurt Quint, CBS News, London.
A team of American doctors, firefighters, and rescue dogs and their handlers returned home today after a week of earthquake relief efforts in Armenia. Arriving in the earthquake region today was Mother Teresa, saying she wants to give survivors tender love and care. More snow and sub-freezing temperatures, meanwhile, are only adding to the misery. Bill McLaughlin reports.
It is already 10 days since the devastating earthquake struck, but the people of Armenia are still wandering the cemeteries of places like Leninakan, burying their dead. For the gravediggers, the work is literally non-stop. What is left of the Mioyan family came here today. A father, son, and daughter come to bury a wife and mother, a son and baby brother. This scene is repeated as the rubble of the earthquake continues to surrender the dead. This man, Yuri Magarian, has been digging for the bodies of his brother, sister-in-law, and their 2 children. Just across the street, there's a pile of coffins waiting to be filled. This Sunday in Armenia is also a time to pray.
The church is a major force in Armenia, uniting Armenians into a kind of extended family. Not surprisingly, during times of trouble and disaster, it's toward their church that the Armenian people turn.
Armenians say theirs is the oldest established Christian church. Throughout their history, the Armenians have suffered a series of natural and man-made disasters. Each time, Armenians found strength in their church. The relief effort continues to be chaotic and disorganized, but the authorities seem to be doing their haphazard best. Supplies are getting through. Crowds push and shove for scraps of clothing. Elsewhere, there's a better organized effort to hand out canned goods. And just about everyone seems to be carrying a loaf of bread. In the rubble, there is a growing acceptance of the tragedy. People are slowly starting to get on with life, finding a family album, or a cherished family portrait, a daughter's dowry. But for others, getting on with life will take time, a lot of it. Inevitably, the landscape of Armenia is strewn with shattered lives. Bill McLaughlin, CBS News, Leninakan.
One of 3 closed reactors at the Savannah River nuclear plant. It's unclear if this will affect startup of the reactor, which is set for summer. Startup then is considered critical. Savannah River is the only current source of a rare gas needed to make nuclear weapons. White House officials said today that President Reagan will shift $900 million away from other Energy Department projects to the weapons program to pay for repairs at nuclear plants. A fire today in a South Bend, Indiana residential hotel killed at least 1 person and injured 6 others. Officials could not account for 3 more. About 100 residents were evacuated and taken to a nearby shelter for the homeless. Key West off the Florida coast has always been a lazy, sleepy sort of place. That's what people liked about it. The problem for the locals, as Juan Vasquez reports, is that these days too many people are liking Key West too much.
Time was when the folks who live in Key West used to head for Mallory Square at sunset. Now it's the tourists who go to watch the madcap characters and artisans, to drink in the local color and get into the right mood.
That's where you are.
Jimmy Buffett's song spread the popularity of Key West across the country, but these days he's singing a different tune.
If you want to put the way I feel about development in Key West, that's the line that I love. There's always more dollars than cents, spelled S-E-N-S-E.
Once a sleepy island at the southern tip of the United States, the resort now draws 1 million visitors a year. Key West is in, and that means the locals are out.
People have to leave. It's been there 30, 40, 50 years, and I was born there. But they got to get out sooner or later.
Natives like Cruz say they're being driven out by real estate speculation and the highest cost of living in Florida. Homes bought for $1,000 a generation ago sell for more than $100,000 today. Paradise is getting expensive for everyone.
Well, drinking down here is like a sport. But you're lucky if you can find a place where you can get a beer for less than $2.
Old-timers say hotel and restaurant workers, indispensable to the tourist industry, were once content to be paid in sunshine. But sunshine won't pay the rent anymore. Some affordable housing is being built at the insistence of the city. But right now, the cheapest room rents for $450 a month, more than half of what a waiter earns. It's especially hard on young people.
When they first get out of high school, it's very difficult to make it, and so they maybe have to go elsewhere. And that's unfortunate.
One day, it's ham and bacon. Next day, there ain't nothing shaking.
The danger is that the old Key West, where Hemingway Road and Harry Truman vacationed, is vanishing to make way for one more resort for the rich.
If you have to hold down 2 jobs, and if you have to be pretty well-to-do in order to move into this town, it's definitely going to change the flavor of this town.
I wish all these people would go home. Just come down and visit and go home.
And that's the problem. As the magic of Key West lures more outsiders, natives fear the sun is setting on their way of life. Juan Vasquez, CBS News, Key West.
Jackson led hundreds of people on a march through Manhattan today. They were demonstrating on behalf of the homeless. One volunteer said the idea was to grab the attention of shoppers buying Christmas gifts and force them to think about people who don't have as much as they do. This is the season of giving, and tonight on Inside Sunday, we look at just who is giving, not just at Christmas, but all year round. We begin with the country's largest single age group, the baby boomers. Statistics show they don't give as much of their income to charity as their parents did, but many are starting to volunteer their time.
John, what you do today? What you do today?
The homeless man spent his day on the street, and so did the volunteer. But in Bob Evans' case, the street was Wall Street.
LT, can you give me an offering, 25 million, 2 years, please?
Twice a month, Bob Evans leaves his job as an international bond trader, forgoes his Upper West Side digs, skips the health club, and spends a night at the shelter. Sunday mornings often find him in a soup kitchen.
5 at 9. Okay, currency 84. I feel a responsibility to give something back to the system. You know, I've grown up with a lot of benefits to society. I've grown up in a great family and a nice home, a great education and a good job. And a lot of people aren't as fortunate as I am.
That seems to be dawning on many young professionals.
You want to do something on, I don't know, like a tutoring project or maybe a recreation program with homeless kids on the 3rd day?
In New York, a group called New York Cares started 2 years ago to help eager yuppies find volunteer jobs. New York Cares has never advertised. In 2.5 years, it's placed over 700 young people.
All these people we're talking about step over the homeless guy in the subway grate on the way to work. And you can only do that for so long. I think there's probably a sense of sort of yuppie guilt out there.
But if guilt brings them in, it's often the discovery that they really are needed that brings them back.
I feel good. I feel like I've done something.
Well, there isn't very much out here. Social workers welcome the help. They say that while typical yuppies may not really understand much about the homeless, the point is that they are trying. The simple fact that they have come communicates a lot.
And just the idea that no task is insurmountable is something. Our men are usually so depressed, and these people are so optimistic.
Volunteer organizations hope that this all signals the end of the me generation. Desperate for help, they are starting to tailor their schedules to fit into busy yuppie lives. Busy yuppies are finding that the benefits of helping often are mutual.
When I think that things are going bad in my life, it doesn't take me long to think back and say, hey, you know, things aren't that bad. I can tell you what's bad.
While individuals volunteer their time, big business is counted on for its bucks. But there are some new realities in the corporate world. As Jerry Bowen reports, corporate budgets don't have as much give as they used to.
It's corporate money that helps America's dancers go round, corporate donations that keep museum walls from going bare and help the nation's orchestras stay in tune. But corporate giving to the arts, to education, like the corporate world itself, is undergoing major change in the age of buyouts and mergers.
If you've had a grant from General Foods and a grant from Philip Morris, we now only have one grant.
For years, corporate giving has grown faster than inflation, reaching $4.5 billion a year in 1987, but the giving has leveled off.
It's going to take extraordinary commitment on the part of the management of corporations to keep that giving going in face of profitability issues.
Nowhere is the issue mirrored more sharply than in the twin cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, where corporate giving is twice the national average. Pillsbury, which gives away 3% of its pre-tax profits, is fighting a takeover by a British conglomerate, Grand Metropolitan.
It's a lose-lose situation in the takeovers. If the newcomer comes in, they may cut contributions. If the takeover target has to take on debt, then their contributions go down anyway.
We are not here to break up this valuable company.
Grand Met promises not to change Pillsbury's giving policy, but operators of this recycling and education center for high school dropouts are nervous. Pillsbury and other local corporate giants support the center, in part out of local self-interest.
What happens in their community affects them because they live here. I'm afraid that the people that in charge of Grand Met don't live here.
The corporations are targeting their charities more carefully than ever. In California, ARCO gives almost as much money to early education as to universities, part of a national trend of philanthropy as investment policy.
It's in our best interests to take an investment approach and to ensure that more of those young kids go in school, stay in school, and become producers instead of tax eaters.
And as corporate giving becomes leaner and meaner, there is apprehension that the next generation of managers may not share the commitment to giving away the profits.
We no longer have the corporate statesman speaking to the society and to their peers about the necessity of this involvement.
Yes, it's corporate dollars that make the dancers go round. The concern now is that the dances will have to be shorter. Jerry Bowen, CBS News, Los Angeles.
In just a moment, Inside Sunday will continue with a look at people who volunteer to help the most helpless among us. Volunteerism. We've talked about gifts of time and donations of money, but perhaps the most precious gift of all is oneself. Lynn Brown reports now on people who volunteer themselves to infants who have so little but want nothing more than to be held.
71-year-old Beulah Linwood never had any children of her own. But hearing about the plight of border babies, babies who call the hospitals they are born in home, brought her to this New York hospital and what she calls a labor of love.
When a baby smiles, it's like looking at an angel.
Beulah Linwood is only one of a growing number of volunteers drawn to border babies. Babies whose parents are drug abusers. Babies whose parents are homeless. Babies either suffering drug withdrawal symptoms or AIDS. And the numbers are growing at a frightening pace, up almost 100% in the last year alone. They are special babies who need special volunteers.
I can't describe how they feel. I just love the way they feel. I just love holding them, and when they're crying, I like to see them calm down.
So for over a year, Beulah Linwood has been coming to Harlem Hospital, providing the unique human touch all babies need.
They're bonding, and they're getting the love. And if babies don't receive this, they don't develop and they don't thrive properly.
Though homeless, these babies are not forgotten. Many are waiting to go into state-selected foster homes, a wait that can sometimes take up to a year. A year is a long time for any baby, but in the AIDS ward, some of them may never leave. That's one of the harsh realities the volunteers there are willing to face.
When I started, I knew that there would be a lot of pain involved, too. I knew that they would eventually move on to foster homes or die. And
Lori is a 25-year-old singer who first learned of the program through her church. She began coming once a week in August.
And I really want to do it more.
Volunteers like Lori Petrowski and Beulah Linwood say they'll keep coming as often as they can for as long as they can.
I may be important to them, but they're just as important to me.
Jingle bells, jingle all the way.
Even more important is whether there'll be enough volunteers to take care of the alarming number of border babies who pass through the city system every month.
Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey!
Lynn Brown, CBS News, New York.
One more note about giving. It turns out that those who have the least give the most. That goes for both time and money. People who make under $10,000 a year give a greater percentage of their income to charity than any other group of earners. And the experts say that people who work and therefore have less free time are more likely to volunteer than those who do not. That's our CBS Evening News. Dan Rather, of course, will be here tomorrow. And later on tonight, Bill Plant with the CBS Sunday Night News. I'm Susan Spencer. Have a good week and a good evening.
This is CBS.